Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'm going to be demonstrating how to crochet the Bernat Bobble Stripe Crochet Basket. This is a free pattern you'll find on Yarnspirations.com. Please follow the link in the description to find out more information about this pattern. To make this pattern, you will need 2 colors of Bernat Maker Home Dec, whichever colors you choose, and just 1 ball of each. You'll also need a US 11.5 millimeter crochet hook, or if you can't find that size or don't have it in your collection, a 12 millimeter crochet hook works just as well. To make this pattern, we're going to need to triple strand this yarn. So I'm going to show you a technique where you can do that with just 1 ball, or if you prefer, or if you're making a bunch, you can just pull from 3 balls of the same color at the same time. Let's take a closer look at the Bernat Bobble Stripe Crochet Basket. As you can see, this basket does have soft sides, but it does also stand up on its own. It also features these great little handles on top, which are totally optional. You could just crochet like right along. We'll see how to do that later, but you can leave those out if you like, or you can make those longer if you'd like it more of a hanging or a handle that's a little bit longer and easier for you to carry around more. And it also features these really great bobbles. It's a little harder to see them in the black yarn here, but I do love how it looks in the finished basket in person. You can see here it's a nice little handy size, great for filling up with your extra yarn balls or whatever you like to have handy. So I'm going to be demonstrating this in some other colors, so it's a little bit easier to see. So let's go ahead and get started on our basket together. Now the first thing we need to do before we begin our basket is to triple the yarn. If you would prefer to make a much smaller basket, you can adjust your hook size just a little bit smaller than what's recommended on the label. And then you can use it single held and you'll get a really cute little small basket. But we're going to triple our yarn today. So what I've done first is I have made a slip knot, and this is a relatively large slip knot. And I can make it even bigger if I want to here to get my fingers in it a little easier here. There we go. But I'm going to go ahead and leave a little bit of a tail there so that we can weave in our ends a little easier when we are done. Now with that slip knot, I'm not going to put it on the hook. I'm going to put my fingers in there, as you can see right here. Doesn't matter if you're right or left-handed, you could do it either way. I can actually do this one left-handed even. So we're just going to grab that yarn and pull it through into another big loop. Then we put our hand through that loop, grab another loop of yarn, and pull that through. And now I'm going to switch back to my right hand because I am right-handed. But as you can see, I'm not worried about putting this loop on my hand in a particular direction or anything like that. We just want to make some great big loops. And it doesn't matter what size they are. They don't all have to be even or anything like that. We just want to keep basically making big sloppy chains by hand. And when we do that, let's go back and look at what we've made here. You can see at any given point in this strand, and we can just easily straighten it right out by running our hands right along it like this. At any point in this strand, we now have 3 strands. So there's a little bit of overlap right here when there's change over, so to speak, from one chain to the next, but this doesn't really come off as bulky in this pattern at all. So you can use this technique to essentially triple the width of your yarn as you go. So I always like to take the time to go ahead and do quite a bit of this yarn before I begin crocheting and just sort of have it set aside nicely for me before I actually begin crocheting with it. So you can go ahead and get some of your yarn tripled here, and then we will get started on our basket. All right, so now we can begin our first round. We're going to start with a magic circle, and then we're going to chain 1 and work 10 half double crochets in the ring. There are several different methods to start a magic circle, and there's one linked in the written pattern that is a free pattern PDF on Yarnspirations.com. But here's how I do it. I'm going to take my yarn, and starting with that cut end, I am going to wrap it towards me twice over my finger, like so. And I want to make sure to leave my end here for weaving in. Then I am going to insert my hook under both of these loops. And even though we're using 3 strands, we're just going to call each of these our loops. This is one loop, this is the second loop, just as if it were just one strand. You do, however, of course, have to take a little bit more time when you're doing it with all 3 strands here. So then we're just going to gently pull that loop in front of the other one, yarn over, like so, and pull through like for a slip stitch, and that will help lock our loop together, and now we can start crocheting into it. So we're going to follow the instructions and make a chain 1, and then we're going to work those 10 half double crochets right into the ring. So I'm going to yarn over and go right into that ring, and at this point I'll go ahead and carefully pull my finger out, and I want to go into that ring and underneath that tail end of our yarn. We want to make sure that we enclose that tail end as well in each of these stitches so that we can pull on that end to close up our center circle here. So you can see I just kind of work very gently for this first stitch or so. There we go. We've got 1 half double crochet made. You can see just how big these stitches are with these tripled yarn. So now we need to do that 9 more times. Just working right into that ring and making sure you work over that tail end as well. So if it starts getting a little too short, you can give it another pull. And make sure too, you can see here, I seem to have dropped one of my loops. Totally fine, it happens. Just gently undo that stitch and redo it if you drop one of those loops. Continue making your 10 half double crochets into the magic ring, and I will see you at the end of round 1. Okay, so at the end of the first round, you should have your 10 half double crochets all worked into that magic circle and your tail sticking out there on the end. We're going to join with a slip stitch, but before we do that, I really like to use stitch markers in the first and last stitch of each round whenever I'm working in the round. When you're joining with a slip stitch, it's very easy to accidentally count that slip stitch as one of your stitches and lose track of where exactly that round began and ended. So by putting stitch markers here in that first and last stitch, I always know and can keep track of each one of these rounds just that little bit easier. So now I need to sort that out a little bit there and get it back on my hook. There we are. And now we're ready to go ahead and join. So we can just insert our hook into that first stitch we made and make our slip stitch. There we are. And this way we won't accidentally work into that stitch when we don't want to. At this point, it's a good idea. I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the way here for just a minute. We're going to give a good firm tug here on our magic circle. This is why we need to work over that tail so that when we pull on it, it will close up this circle. Now when I pull, I really like to stabilize it with my other hand. So we don't really see it pinching together, but you can feel it in your other hand, and it just lets you know, and it makes it a little bit easier, honestly, just to tug on and get a nice tight pull there. So once that's nice and tight there, you can go ahead and weave in that end with your yarn needle and just make sure to go back and forth a couple different directions to really secure that magic circle. You can, of course, leave all your weaving in for the end as well, but you might need to give it another tug just to pull it up nice and tight before you do weave in that end. So anytime you are in between rows like this, it is always a good idea to stop and make some more yarn if you need it before you begin your next round. Okay, so rounds 2, 3, and 4 are pretty much just growing our basket with some standard circle increases. So round 2 is going to be chain 1 and then work 2 half double crochets in each stitch around. So since our first round had 10 stitches, that means our second round will have 20. So when you make your first stitch there in your next round, you can go ahead and just move that stitch marker right on up to your next first stitch here, or your new first stitch of the round. There we are. And then we again just make a second half double crochet going right back in that same exact space, like so. And now we've got 2 stitches in that stitch. So we're going to put 2 of these half double crochets in each one of these stitches around, again for a total of 20. So I will see you at the end of round 2. Okay, so here we are at the end of round 2, and we've got our 20 half double crochets made. Since I've made my last stitch of the round, I'm going to go ahead and move that stitch marker up to that last stitch. There we are. And then I will once again join with a slip stitch. Now rounds 3 and 4 are pretty darn simple and just continue making a flat circle. So for round 3, we chain 1 and half double crochet in the first stitch and then make 2 half double crochets in the stitch after that. And then we repeat that all the way around. 1 half double crochet in the next stitch, 2 in the stitch after that. 1, 2, 1, 2, all the way around. And at the end, that will give you a total of 30 stitches. Round 4 continues this with 2 half double crochets in the first stitch and then a half double crochet in each of the stitches, 2 stitches after that. So 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, all the way around for a total of 40 stitches. For the sake of time, I'm not going to demo those because, again, it's just half double crochets worked all the way around and we've already talked through it. Rounds 5 and 6 are a little different. That is when we start building up the sides of our basket. So for rounds 5 and 6, and indeed 7, but 7 has a twist in it, we are going to just half double crochet in each stitch around. So again, you'll want to move your stitch marker and go right into that first stitch for the first half double crochet and move the stitch marker on up to that stitch. And then we simply half double crochet even, which is another way of saying half double crochet in each stitch around. So you'll want to do that for rounds 5 and 6, each of which should have 40 stitches. Then when we get to round 7, it's exactly the same again. Half double crochet in each stitch around. But when we get to the end, we're going to turn. So I will see you at the end of round 7. Okay, so let's say we're at the end of round 7. To finish up round 7, we're going to join with a slip stitch in our first stitch, just as we've been doing all along here, but then we are going to turn to work from the inside of the basket. So we've been working around so far, and you can see our basket's cupping up this way. If, as you're crocheting, your basket's been cupping this way, it's not a big deal. Just take your time and flip it right back out, right side out there, because now we do need to work from the inside of the basket. And this is going to be the same for rounds 8, 10, and 12. Those are all going to be worked from the inside because we're going to be making bobbles. And when you make a bobble, generally speaking, you're pushing it out to the other side of the fabric. So let's go ahead and start round 8. As I said, we turn at the end of round 7. So now we're on the inside of the basket. You can see that because there's my little tail that I haven't woven in yet. We'll just get that nice and inside the basket there out of our way for now. There we go. And then we're going to chain 1, just as we normally would, and we're going to work back in the opposite direction. And this is, again, where having these stitch markers is so handy. Because we've turned, we haven't worked into this one yet, even though it kind of looks like we have. So we need to work into this one at the end. And we start here. This right here is our slip stitch, so we need to make sure to skip over that. So let's go ahead and begin. We are going to single crochet in the first stitch, which is of course that first marked stitch here. So we make that single crochet and we'll move that stitch marker right on up. Especially with these shorter stitches, it's even easier to lose track of exactly where you're at in your round without those stitch markers. There we go. And then we are going to bobble in the next stitch. Okay, now the thing about a bobble is not only is it worked from the wrong side, but they come in a wide variety of sizes. It's essentially a double crochet decrease, but all worked into the same stitch. And when you put short stitches on either side, it makes it pop right out into that great bobble shape. For this pattern, it's actually a very small bobble because this big chunky yarn really makes it stand out. So we're going to yarn over like for a double crochet and get right into that next stitch. Yarn over and pull up our loop. Yarn over and pull through 2 and stop with 2 loops left on the hook. Yarn over again, go back into that same stitch. There we are. Yarn over and pull up a loop. Yarn over and pull through 2. And now we're going to pull through all 3 of those stitches. So basically it's double crochet 2 together, but both the legs are worked into that same stitch. And then when we make a single crochet in the next stitch, which is the next thing we need to do, that's going to fold this over and push this bobble to the outside of our basket. So we really want to make sure that as we bring our hook down for that next stitch, we bring it to the inside like so and sort of bend that bobble right over as we go into the next stitch for our single crochet. And when we finish that single crochet here and we make it nice and low, nice tight single crochet, we don't want to make it a tall loose one, you can see it has made those double crochets bobble right on out on the surface of our basket. So we continue working from the inside here. So after we make our bobble, let me find my place on the instructions here real quick. After we make our bobble, we're going to single crochet in the next 3 stitches. So I've already done 1 there, so we need 2 more. So there's 1 and 2. And then we just repeat it again. Bobble in the next stitch, single crochet in the next 3. So let's work 1 more of those bobbles together here. And you can see here, I'm kind of, messing with my basket. It's turning inside and out. However you need to work, if you do need to go ahead and turn it wrong side out to work this round, it's totally fine. We can just pop it right side out when we're all done. So let's make a bobble in our next stitch. And we've yarned over for a double crochet, go into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up my loop, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over again, go right back into that same stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2, and then yarn over and pull through all 3. Then as you make your next 3 single crochets, just make sure that that first one, you sort of bend it over and pull the top of that stitch right down next to that single crochet, and that's what will make that bobble stick out so beautifully right on the other side. So we're going to continue working that same repeat all around, bobbled in 3 single crochets, bobbled in 3 single crochets, until we get to the end here. And remember, we had that single crochet, actually we'll be coming around this way. We had that single crochet we made first. So at the end of the round, we'll just have 2 single crochets with the last one ending in that last stitch. And then we'll be done with round 8. So I will see you when we're done with round 8. Okay, to prevent any confusion, I'm just going to go ahead and let you know I've used a stitch marker here to tack down that end so it stops getting in my way. But otherwise, we've finished round 8. So at the end of round 8, we would go ahead and join to that first stitch, and then we are going to break our yarn. We aren't going to need to use this yarn for the next couple rows, but we'll be bringing it back later. So after you've joined, that's when you break your yarn, and we're going to go ahead and cut it. So when you've tripled the yarn, that makes that just a little bit more difficult, or a little bit more interesting, I should say. So I always like to sort of cut my yarn when I've tripled it like this a little bit further away than I normally would. Normally I would leave a 6-inch tail. This time I want to leave a little more, and I also want to make sure that I cut after that first loop. Otherwise, you can end up giving it a tug and actually undoing your work straight from there. So I'm going to go ahead and pull back a little bit, and if you want to finagle your loops, they're a little bit shorter at this point, you can absolutely do that. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead here and cut through those loops. And I've already got it tripled over here. I'm going to go ahead and leave those because I'm going to need to pull that up later. So I want to kind of use my yarn end here to secure this end. You can see I just kind of pull that right through that loop there, just to give myself a little knot there so I can set that aside and still use that for later. And then if I come back here to this cut end, then I can sort of pull on this one until it creates a knot, put it through there again if need be, just to secure that a little better. Whatever makes you comfortable there at the end, and then you can weave in that end as is. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and just pull that end right up through here. And then, like I say, this is an end that I would weave in at the end of my basket. So just to keep it, just keep it out of our way a little bit here, I'm going to wind it up and tack it down to the inside of our basket with our other one, just so it stays out of our way until we're ready to weave in our ends. So I'm just going to squish it right into that stitch marker there so it's all held out of our way. So now we are going to essentially turn again to make round 9 from the outside of the basket. Since we've cut our yarn, we don't have to turn with the hook in there. We can just turn to work from the outside of the basket again. Make sure you're working from the outside so your ends are on the inside. And this is where we're going to join our second color. So I will pull up my color 2 here and make some yarn with this one. We've got to triple this one as well, and then we'll be ready to begin round 9. Okay, so with our new color here, all triple stranded, we're ready to begin round 9. So we're going to join the last stitch we made in the previous round, but remember we're working from the inside, so then now that we're from the outside again, we're just going right there to that first stitch. So we want to go ahead and join to that one, and we can join with a slip stitch. So we put our hook in that stitch first, take our yarn end here, lay it right over our hook, pull that up and through, and then make sure we're working with the working end here, not the tail. We can just go ahead and pull through. And that joins us right there with a slip stitch. And different people like to handle this different ways. Some people actually count that as the chain 1 at the beginning of this round, or you can pull it down real tight and close to the surface of your fabric like so, and then chain 1. Whichever you prefer, it's totally up to you. With this big thick yarn, it really wants to look like a chain 1, so I'm going to go ahead and count it as such. After that, we're simply going to single crochet in each stitch around. So you'll want to go right back into that stitch you joined to, and I like to just tack down that end by crocheting over it. I don't like to crochet over my ends instead of weaving them in general, but for that first stitch of a round, it never hurts to just tack it down a little bit for yourself right there. So then I will go ahead and move that stitch marker up. And then after that, I'm simply going to single crochet in each stitch around. So you should have a total of 40 stitches at the end of round 9. So as I say, at the end of round 9, you should have a total of 40 stitches, all single crochets. You just work into each one of those previous stitches and right into the top of the bobble there. So make sure you end in that last marked stitch, move your stitch marker up, and we'll join with a slip stitch. Then we're going to be ready for round 10, but round 10, of course, we need to turn first. So that instruction is actually at the end of round 9. So we'll finish that up with our slip stitch there and turn to work from the inside of the basket. So then we are going to chain 1 and we are going to single crochet in each of the first 3 stitches. You'll remember the last time we did one of these bobble rounds, round 8, we started with just 1 single crochet before our first bobble. We want to offset them and put our bobbles in between the other 2 bobbles. So that's why round 10 is different from round 8. So we go into that first stitch, of course, and move our stitch marker right on up to that new stitch. There we are. and then single crochet in the next two. So there's 1 and 2, and then bobble in the next stitch. So the bobble again is just the same. It's a double crochet 2 together, but with both of those little legs or posts worked into the same stitch. And with those short stitches on either side, it really makes it pop on out. So then we just repeat again with another 3 single crochets and then another bobble. And that is our repeat that gets us all the way around round 10. But since we end with a bobble in that last stitch, joining becomes especially important. So I'll see you at the end when it's ready to join. Okay, so now I've made my last bobble in round 10 and it's time to join. As you can see, I've worked it into my last stitch of the round here. So I'm going to go ahead and move that stitch marker right on up to the top of that bobble stitch. There we go. And then I need to join to that first stitch. And that's going to be the small stitch that pulls this decrease down into a bobble. So we really, again, want to make sure that we sort of fold it over so that that bobble goes to the outside of our basket. Insert our hook in for that slip stitch and just go ahead and make it a really, really tight slip stitch. Remember, we're not going to be working back into that slip stitch at all. That's why we're using those stitch markers to make sure we don't. So you can make that a really nice tight slip stitch that'll really help make that bobble pop. After that, we actually break this color again, and then we repeat essentially rounds 9 and 8 for another set of bobbles in our main color. So let me pull up the finished basket here. You can see on our little sample here, we've essentially worked right through this first line of contrast color bobbles. And then we would break our yarn and do another round with our first color, the color we started with, color A or main color, depending on what you like to use for those terms. So as I say, we would just join to that first stitch again from the outside, single crochet around, and then we would turn to work from the inside. And I know it's a little harder to see here, but if I turn it sideways in silhouette, you can see that third round of bobbles in our first color is going to be the same as round 8 so that it's lined up with those other contrasting bobbles there then in between. You can see offset a little bit right there. So you just go ahead and repeat those rounds as I've already demonstrated. And then after you have finished those repeats of those 2 rounds, then you would break those yarns and join again in that first stitch with your second color, and we'd be ready for round 13. So at the end of round 12, you would go ahead and break that color, and then you would join with your last color with that first stitch, just as we've been joining all our other colors, to begin round 13. However, if you wanted to make the whole thing in one color or not switch colors, then you'd be in the same position I am, where we just go ahead and chain and start working into that first marked stitch. So round 13 is very simply the same as a lot of these other rounds we've been doing in between our bobble rounds. We're just going to single crochet in each stitch around. But this time you want to make sure, again, you're working from the outside of the basket with all those little ends on the inside waiting to be woven in. So just single crochet in each stitch around for round 13, whether you're joining a new color or continuing with your old one, and I'll see you when we're ready for round 14. Okay, so at the end of round 13, you should have your 40 single crochets made. You can kind of see that here, and you can also see that's that round right here. Round 15 is just chain 1 and do a round of half double crochets, just working evenly, 1 stitch in each stitch. So let's move on to round 15 for our demo. Round 15 is where we're going to make those handles. So if you prefer to leave off handles, you can simply work this one without the chains and skipping stitches. Or if you want longer handles, you can simply chain quite a few more than called for in the pattern. So to begin round 15, we're going to start with a chain 1, and then we're going to single crochet in each of the first 14 stitches. Now, my sample is a little bit smaller, so I'm going to not go quite as far, but I'm just going to eyeball it and get us about to where I think 14 would be on our full-sized basket. So I'll move that stitch marker up, and then as I say, you'll want to crochet in each of those first 14 stitches here. So mine is about half size. I'm going to go ahead and just do 7 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we're ready to make those handles. And the handles start out, we're going to do another round to help make them a little more solid, but it's essentially a long chain and then some skipped stitches to create an open space for the handle. So again, this is something you can totally adjust for you. If you like a long handle, make more chains. If you don't like a handle at all, just go ahead and work evenly all the way around for this round. But to make this little handle, we're going to chain 6, and we're going to chain 6 tightly. So we're not going to work back into these individual chains. We want to make sure these chains are nice and tight. So there's 1, 2, and I'm going to just continue making a few more here. But again, you should make however many you actually want for your handle. Just make sure to make a note or write it down, because you'll want to do the same for the other handle to make sure they're the same length. So after you've got your chain, then you are going to skip the next 6 stitches and single crochet in the stitch after that. Again, my basket here is about half size, so I'm only going to skip 3. So 1, 2, 3, you would want to count out 6. And then in the next one, you go ahead and single crochet right in that next one, right after the ones you've skipped. Like so. So there we go. So you would have that little space there for your little handle. Then after you've skipped those 6 stitches, you're going to single crochet in the next 14. So I've already got 1 here. So that would just be 13 more for you after that. So I'll just do my little shortened version here. I'll do about 7 again, I think. Should about work out here. Let's see. And then that should take you almost all the way around to the end of your basket. And if you're making the full size one, you should just have 6 stitches left there at the end, including that little last marked stitch. I only have 3 because again, I'm working my little sample. But once you've got those 6 stitches left, then it's time to make that second handle. So you'll want to chain 6 again, or however many stitches you chained for your first handle. Again, it's totally up to you if you want to customize it. You just need to make sure and make them even. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll do 1 more for me. There we are. And then if you skip those last 6 stitches and simply join to that first one there, I know we're skipping over that marked one, but that's that last one we skip. Then we join to that first one with a slip stitch, then we will have made our second handle. Like so. And we don't really have to worry about marking our last stitch on this one because our next round is our last round. So once we've got our 2 little handles there made of whatever length you want them to be, then we're ready for round 16. All right, so round 16 is the final round of our basket. And if you chose to leave off the handles and just work even before, that's essentially what you're going to be doing again. Just chain 1 and single crochet all the way around. However, if you have worked those handles, this is where we're going to firm those up a little bit. So we're going to start with a chain 1 and a single crochet right into that very first stitch. So we'll go ahead and take that stitch marker out and set it aside because we're not going to need that one anymore. And then it looks like I'm going to have to make some more yarn, but essentially we're going to single crochet in each stitch right up until we get to that handle. So you go ahead and get started on that while I make some more yarn. Okay, so I've single crocheted in each stitch right up until we get to that chain for our handle. Now I am going to I'm going to single crochet right into this chain space. As I said, we're not going to work into each individual chain. We're just going to single crochet right into that space right around the chain itself. Right around all those chains, in fact. So I found that 8 single crochets gave me a really nice solid cover of these chains. But of course, if you've changed the length of your chain handle here, you'll need to add or subtract stitches as you work around here. There's really not, 8 isn't so much important. We're not going to be working another round. It's our last round. So if you want to change it, whatever covers your handle really nicely is fine. Just again, you might want to make a note on your first handle to make sure that you add the same number of single crochets around your second handle. So I have been talking here instead of counting. So let's see where we're at here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So yep, looks like there's room for 1 more there. And if you've made your 8 and you find you've got a bit of a gap there, go ahead and add a 9th one. Doesn't really matter. Again, it's just to give us that nice solid handle look. After we've worked over that handle like that, then we just jump right back into that next stitch and single crochet in each one of those stitches around until we get to our second handle. And then we can work around that handle and then join to our first stitch and finish off. Okay, so when you've made all your stitches for round 16, it's time to join to that first stitch, that first single crochet we did. And you can join with a slip stitch and break your yarn and finish off and weave in your ends however you like. But I'm going to share my favorite way to finish off, especially when working in the round like this. Now, again, I want to make sure that I'm past a couple of these little chains here. So I've got one really close to my hook right now. So I'm going to jump out past this one before I cut my yarn here. And I always like to leave a little extra. It just, it's better to have a little too much than to have not enough. So we got really lucky here. We've got this one right here. So if I carefully pull this through, I don't want to undo this at all. I want to make sure that it's going through there and that I can send a little, let me get this right back in the center here. Sorry about that. We'll send that end right through there to sort of secure that end nice and safe. There we are. And then I will go ahead and pull that whole end right up through that stitch. And then I can put it on my yarn needle. And because I've got just this one end, I can use a regular sized yarn needle. If you are weaving in a big section like this, you may need, of course, a much larger yarn needle. Those are available as well. And then I will take my needle and I'm just going to go ahead and insert the needle under the first stitch here, like so. And this is sort of my seamless join technique. I want to make sure I didn't twist up my yarn there. Nope. Okay. We're all still straightened out. So I'm going to gently just pull that right through. All that end there, get all that through right under that first stitch. And then if I pull it so that that strand right there that's going to that next stitch is about the same size as these other stitches, the other V's on top of the other stitches, then I can take my yarn needle and send it right back down to the center of the stitch we came out of, right between the strands of the V there, the front and back loop. And again, just pull that through gently. And as you can see, if I finagle it and give it a little wiggle there, it just blends right on in to those other stitches. You can see there's a little bit of our join there, but otherwise that is invisible. So then on the inside of our basket, we can simply go ahead and weave in that end just as we would normally weave in all our other ends. And that's how to crochet the Bernat Bobble Stripe Crochet Basket. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll give this pattern a try, as well as Bernat Maker Home Dec. It's a really unique yarn that's a lot of fun to use. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.